And we're off. Okay.
Perfect.
So, hi, I'm Nick Fannin from Bright Red Triangle at Edinburgh Napier University, and I'm joined today by brand expert, marketing specialist, and creative agent, Ewan Morton, the managing director at creative design agency Morton Ward. Ewan, thanks for joining me on the call today. I'd like to first ask you a little bit about the work you do with Morton Ward.
Yeah, of course. So we're a creative agency. We were a family business. We were set up in 1987. So we've been in this industry for the best part of 32, 33 years, which is no mean feat. Over that time, I've been with the business for the best part of 16 years. And our real role is to work with our client base and to help them communicate and engage with the audiences that matter to them. So that might be public sector organisations and helping them to influence or change or convince people to exhibit a particular type of behaviour, or it might be working with private sector businesses to exhibit particular kind of commercial results. That might be selling more, or it might be raising an awareness of a particular product or a particular company. And we do that through a range of different ways. That might be using a range of different media. It might be print, it might be digital, it might be experiential, it might be outdoor. But the kind of core that we always come back to is that creative idea, that creative concept, that way of taking a particular message or a particular piece of information that needs to be communicated and finding a way to communicate it in a way that engages a particular audience. Hopefully that works.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the clients that you work with?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we work. I mean, I did a piece of research, a bit of activity, probably about 5 years ago now, and there's about 17 different markets that we work across. So those have been things as diverse as sport, they've been as diverse as construction, tourism, education, public sector bodies, the third sector. Within that, though, we probably started to narrow down to kind of three kind of key audiences. We still do a lot of work with the public sector, so we've been a roster agency for the Scottish Government and a roster agency for the Scottish Parliament, working across the full range of government activity. We do a lot of work within higher education with a wide range of universities, including the likes of Durham, St Andrews, as far down Birmingham as as Ashton. Sorry, you've got the same identity, which always surprises me. We also work. We work internationally with an organisation called EEL in Grenoble in France, who are a STFC research facility. So they're like a kind of mini CERN, and we do various bits and pieces for them. But through a lot of the work that we've done within higher education, we have started to develop quite a strong niche in working with spin-outs and startups coming out of that sector. So these are really early stage businesses, really early stage business ideas. They have maybe come out of a research project, they've maybe come out of a group of students getting together and coming up with a particular idea. And through that, we've worked with some really quite interesting and diverse companies. We're working with some who are, at the moment, are working kind of within the biotech field. We've worked within some who are kind of software as a service. We've worked with some organisations who've developed quite innovative products. And I think where we are able to offer advice and guidance at that stage is that we have seen and we understand that process of developing a brand and developing marketing activity from kind of really early stage businesses at the very, very start of their journey, right the way through to sort of more established corporates and public sector organisations who are large and have very well established kind of brands and branding teams or marketing teams. So for what is a relatively small agency, we have a very large wealth of experience across a wide range of sectors.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So one of the things we're hoping you'll be able to do in this interview is just kind of pass on some of that knowledge and experience to some of the hopeful entrepreneurs that we have. And so if we were sort of doing this as a branding 101, start at the beginning, why is branding important for businesses?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's a good question to start for. I think that brands, the first thing to kind of dispel is it's more than the kind of visual look and feel of things, and it's the age-old adage, it is more than just a logo. So your brand is the essence of your business. It is your business's personality. It is the way that you position yourself within a marketplace. And I think the three key things, or the three key reasons of why branding is important. The first being it helps to differentiate you. So within a market of similar products, so if everybody is selling chairs, your brand will help differentiate your chair from other chairs that exist within the marketplace. I think building on top of that, good branding and kind of strong, consistent branding helps to raise visibility of your business vis-a-vis the competition. So if you have a well-established brand that differentiates your chair and you promote it consistently over time, there will be greater awareness within the market of your company and of your brand. And I think the kind of third key thing is that your brand helps to drive the value of your business. So within a world where you have a range of homogenized products, so if you take shoes, a shoe by Jimmy Choo costs a lot more than a shoe by Georgia Asda. Fundamentally, they are the same product. They may have slightly different production techniques. They may have slightly different quality of kind of resources that go into the making of them. But ultimately, the brand helps to define the value of that product. And if you have a strong brand that is respected and is positioned well, you can charge a premium on your product versus the competition. So three things: differentiation, visibility, value, I would say.
Brilliant. Okay, so when do you think, or when do you believe businesses should start thinking about developing that brand identity?
I would say that starts on day one. As soon as you have that business idea, you start to think about your brand and your brand identity. And the reason that I say that is that we as an agency, we kind of see time and time again people who have, or businesses that have started and they have got sort of so far, but they've not really thought about their brand. So they've maybe got a logo that their friend who was a graphic designer cobbled out on a Friday night that they did at the kitchen table, and they maybe had a bit of a think about kind of their tone, but there's no consistency. And at the same time, having not thought about their brand, they've thought quite heavily about legal and about accountancy and about the product and about all of these other factors. But branding is kind of left as a bit of an afterthought. It's sort of, oh, we'll make it look nice at the end. So I would suggest, and I recommend to the students on your course, that they turn that around and say, actually, our brand sits at the very heart of what we do as a business. And this, getting your branding right, is about understanding your audience and your customers. It is about understanding your market. It's about understanding your product. It's about understanding your competition, and taking the time to do this research and to put the time and effort in at the start to really understand how do we sit within that marketplace? How does our product sit within that marketplace? And how do we want our product to be perceived by our customers? I think gives you a really strong foundation to begin to build on. And that, as soon as you can start to put those kind of those building blocks and those sort of foundations of brand and brand identity into your business, it makes all the other business decisions that you take further down the line easier, because you've got that touch point to go back to. If you've defined and you are a new tech startup and your brand is wonderful and exciting and dynamic and it feels fast and energetic and youthful, if you know that that's what your product is at the start, then you can decide further down the line that actually whatever we do within business, the trade shows that we go to, we need to present ourselves like that. Our meetings or our sales pitches that we have, this is how we present. This is the essence that we keep coming back to. So I would say day one, you've got an idea for a business, brilliant. Day 1.5, start thinking about what that brand is and define it from as a very, very, very first stage. Who are we? Why are we important? How do we matter to our audience?
Yeah. So, do you work with your clients to help them figure that out, yeah. Or how would you go about doing that research?
I think that's a very fair question. I think that is one of the kind of key things that we do as an agency. We can work quite strategically with clients, and that's starting right at the beginning, the starting point of that journey, and going, right, let's do that research. Let's understand your customers. Let's understand the market that you work in. Let's understand your competition and how your competition are presenting themselves and what they are saying about themselves. And I think it's something that you can work with an agency to do, but it's equally something as a startup that you can start to do yourself. There are a lot of tools, there are a lot of frameworks out there. I would imagine that everybody has already completed the business model canvas, because it seems to be it exists now as a ubiquitous kind of piece across the whole of the sector. Another one that came from Strategyzer that I thought was really good was the value proposition canvas. And I think taking the time to do the value proposition canvas and understanding your audience and how your product or service dovetails with that and the value that you deliver gives you that starting point for your brand and for your brand identity. And once you know what that piece of value is, then you can start to think about how you want to communicate it to your audiences. So I would use a tool like the value proposition canvas. I would take the time just to go trawling through the internet. It's amazing what you can find if you go and if you know your product, if you know the market that you work in, if you know who your competitors are, trawl your competitors' websites, work out what kind of tone that they use to describe themselves and their product, work out how they present themselves. Are they kind of staid and corporate and quite kind of conservative? Well, if that's how they present themselves in the market, is there an opportunity for a kind of similar product or service that feels more exciting and more dynamic? Equally, if everything feels really wild and exciting and dynamic, maybe there's a reason for coming in and doing something slightly different and being a little bit more corporate or a little bit more staid in terms of what you're choosing to say. So I think, yes, you can commission agencies from day one and you can have kind of fantastic advice and guidance to take you through that process, but also you can do that initial research yourself. And I would say it's being interested in it. It's being interested in your business, it is being interested in your product, it is being interested in the market and the audience and the competition. And if you can get underneath the skin of that and really understand how it all fits together in the market that you want to compete in, then you can start to understand where the gaps are. And once you've found out that gap, that's where you can start to build a brand and hopefully start to get some interesting traction.
Yeah, I mean, we like to talk a lot about curiosity and, being an anthropologist when you go out into the world and looking for these things. So doing that sort of desk research, there's so much opportunity now, there's so much information available. But what about sort of talking to customers, or potential customers or stakeholders? How do you approach that? Because they don't always tell you the truth, do they?
I would agree. I think for me, I am a naturally inquisitive person and I like finding out things. And I think there is an element sometimes just to brass necking it a little bit. So there's a very interesting book called Disciplined Entrepreneurship, which is written by Bill Oler out of MIT. And that kind of tracks out a 24-step process of starting with an idea and then kind of working right the way through that process to the end point. And I think one of the kind of very early stage points or very early stage steps within that is going out and speaking to your customers. And that is an element of sometimes just phoning people up and saying, I have this idea. And I think what I've always found with it, because I did that process for our own business, for Morton Ward and for my own business. And sometimes the kind of starting point with it is I'm a bit nervous of phoning people up and just having that conversation. And what I discovered is actually picking up the phone, and we were looking at the tourism market, and we picked randomly 10 potential customers. People were actually really willing to have a conversation with you if you're honest and just saying, look, this is who we are. For me at that point, we are a creative agency. I'm exploring a potential market. I need to understand what it is that you look for within a creative agency or within the particular services that we deliver. And I was amazed that just by having that very honest and frank and opening to a conversation, how open and willing people were to discuss their actual business needs, which ironically for a kind of a phone call where I was hoping to explore and find out about their potential business needs, resulted in people at the end saying, well, yeah, you sound really interesting. We're happy to have a conversation with you. So it almost turned into business development as opposed to research. So I think find your customers, find out where they exist, find ways to engage and talk with them. You can do it proactively by picking up the telephone and speaking to them. You can do it more covertly by identifying where they are on social media and kind of listening and looking at how they kind of track or talk about either your competitors or about other brands within the marketplace. So there are a lot of tools available now to do that.
Did you find you had to build up your own confidence to go in and start doing that cold calling, or?
No, because I cut my teeth as an account manager in a creative agency, and it's a brutal existence for the best part of kind of 11 years before I got to this stage. So when I first joined the company and I was fresh out of university, there is a nervousness, I think, about having those conversations because you worry about what you will say and how you will come across and how you'll be received. But the more you do it, the more you realize that business is just engaging with people, whether it is through a technological platform, whether it's picking up the phone, whether it's having a meeting. Business is done with people, and the sort of the sooner you can realize that, and the sooner you become more confident in terms of just talking to people and talking about your product and talking about their business. And I think particularly taking it away from that sense or that worry that you have to sell to them. Have a conversation with people and talk about, I'm developing a business, I have this idea, I have potentially a product or a service that I think adds value to you, but I really want to understand what it is that you need within your business to help me develop that. And I think that that's where people tend to open up. As soon as you start talking about other people, as opposed to trying to talk about yourself, then people start to begin to open up and tell you what you need to know.
But there's a real trick in that, because you're trying to perhaps understand their business, and they aren't always able to articulate what it is that they do. Do you have any tips or tricks to help people get into that? I mean, we've used tools like journey mapping and other observational type exercises. Are those things that you do, or?
Yeah, I think the kind of the key one for us from a sort of a branding perspective is looking at those touch points, and that's sort of saying, if we take it on this side of a sheet of paper of people who know nothing about us as a business, and at the other side is somebody who is an absolute advocate, who loves our products, who loves our services, and will kind of self-promote. How do we take somebody from point A all the way through to point B? And you've got a range of different kind of steps that you need to take within that process. One is kind of educational. Person here knows nothing about us and our product. Person here loves everything that we do. So how do we tell people what it is that we do across this journey? The other one that kind of feeds into that is people's attention span. If I know nothing about you, I'm not going to give you that much time. So I'm not willing to read through a 40-page product report that outlines the wonderful academic reasons of why this product is the best thing since sliced bread. It's about, at that early stage, distilling it down into that really key message, that key thing that hooks attention. Right, so you've hooked my attention. There's a little 5-second line or an image or whatever it is. I'm interested. All right, maybe I'll give you 15 seconds and I'll read a quick testimonial from a customer or a quick kind of overview of what the benefit is. Okay, I'm a little bit more interested in this. I'll move on to the next step where I'll give you a little bit more time. Again, there's another very interesting book which is called Watertight Marketing, which was, I can't remember who wrote it now, but it kind of breaks marketing down into really simple, straightforward, simplistic steps. And there's a wonderful diagram within that kind of takes you through the kind of the time that people will give you, which starts off as very little and increases in time as they become interested in you and your product and your business and your service, versus their kind of emotional and rational buying responses within that. So when somebody's doesn't know about you and will only give you 5 seconds, you need to hook them with an emotional response. It's some kind of gut sense of, and you can see it time and time again in advertising, it's that fear of something or that excitement of potential gain or whatever that emotional response might be that hooks you in. Once you've got that hook, it becomes a more rational process of kind of thinking through that buying decision. So for us, there is a complex process of mapping that customer journey from them knowing nothing about you through to a point where they want to buy it. It's understanding within that journey how things such as the time that somebody's willing to give you in order to engage with your communications or messaging, or the type of information that they're looking for. Is it an emotional response? Is it a rational response? How that changes, and within that, mapping out how you engage with people at each point. So is it an initial social media sort of emotive piece that hooks attention, that drives you to a slightly longer video testimonial on a website, that then pushes you to a product spec sheet, that then allows you to sign up for some kind of trial offer, that then gives some kind of contact from a salesperson. So it will be different for each business and for each product, but it's working out for you or for your students as an entrepreneur. How do I map that out? How do I start with someone knowing nothing about me to buying or making a purchase?
Yeah, and how do you view that sort of element of the journey where it flips into suddenly a sales opportunity? how do you map that, and how do can you help?
It's really difficult, and this is one of the age-old challenges of kind of branding and marketing and advertising. That it's not a kind of sort of right brain statistical process where we can go, right, that's definitely the point where that buying decision was made, because that point of influence comes from so many different areas. It might be that I've seen an ad, it might be that I've read something online, it might be that I watched that video testimonial, it might be actually that it's an influencer, my friend bought the product and has told me that it was really good, and it might be that I've kind of come in and explored and done a bit of research on the website and then gone away and thought about it. So trying to hit that exact point of where is that buying decision is really difficult. I think the kind of that it's understanding that kind of customer journey that builds towards that, and it's making sure that within each of those touch points there is a consistency and a cohesion between the brand and the brand identity and the messaging and the value proposition, so that each kind of step and each piece of comms, no matter where somebody joins it, kind of works alone, but also builds on top of each other in order to get to that point where somebody goes, yes.
It's always important to be continuously measuring the activity and the emotional responses you're getting, but it's very difficult to identify.
I think if I could say exactly what that buying decision was, I'd be a very, very rich person. We've not managed to achieve that yet. But I think there is that element of look at, particularly if you're using digital platforms, it becomes easier with a website and with kind of online sort of businesses, and to kind of track that process of how somebody maybe moves through a website or how somebody arrives at a site. So that analytical information is useful, and I think it feeds into kind of understanding your business and understanding the sales process. I also wouldn't rule out the kind of qualitative side. The quantitative data is great, and it gives you a kind of framework to build on. But go out and speak to your customers, or look at how and analyze how sales are made within your business. And if somebody's buying a product and it's or a service at the really early stage, have that conversation with them. How did you find out about us? What was it why did you choose us over the competition? I think for us as an agency, we have to participate in a lot of tendering and procurement in order to win the projects that we work on, both within the public sector, also within the private sector as well. We always ask for feedback. So if we win a project, we ask for feedback. If we lose a project, we ask for feedback, so that we understand what were the reasons that a customer either decided to buy or decided not to buy, and that then helps us feed in and frame our next kind of offer or our next tender process. And it is that process throughout all of this. Do your research, do your learning, never stop kind of thinking and tinkering and understanding and developing and enhancing your brand and your product.
And so another question here, can you always trust the feedback you get?
That's a really interesting question, that one. No, because people don't always necessarily know what they're saying. And there's a wonderful kind of adage, which or kind of myth, I suppose it would be now, within the world of kind of advertising and brand and marketing, which goes back to when smoking was actually able to be sort of promoted and advertised. And they ran a focus group in terms of new packets for Benson & Hedges cigarettes. And they had all the different designs made up and laid out on a table. And everybody came in and went, I absolutely hate that gold packet. It's horrible. I don't know why anyone would choose to run with that. But the key thing was, and the observation that was made, whilst everyone said that they hated it, everybody actually observed it and commented on it and pointed to it and noticed it out of all of the other designs. So the feedback that you were getting is everybody hates it. But the actual response that you were getting is that everybody notices it and wants to engage with it. So I think with any piece of feedback and with any piece of customer sort of research, or with any piece of research, it's that kind of logical, analytical head where you step back and you look at it and say, right, are we looking at it from all of the angles that we can possibly look at it at this moment in time? Yes, they're saying they love it, but is there a reason why they're maybe not telling the truth? Or no, they're saying they don't like it, but actually people have responded to it. So that gives us a potential direction.
That's a really interesting story, actually. Yeah. So I guess we've sort of talked about a few tips and tricks there, and it was great to hear you recommend a couple of books. The Bill Ollett book, I know well. Watertight Marketing is not one that I know, so I'm going to have to go and check that out. But are there any other sort of tools or books or, people you would recommend that maybe you go and find a video to look at or something?
Yeah, I think there is a wealth of information, and I think that is sometimes one of the dangers of my industry is there's so much information now out there that you can become lost down a rabbit hole of trying to kind of get a handle on marketing. And what I would always kind of say is think about your brand and think about kind of the channels that you want to work on in their entirety, but pick one or two and do them well and work out. So say maybe, right, we're working on our website, get your website up and running. Now we're working on our pitch deck, get your pitch deck where you want it to be. Now we're looking at social media, right, we're only going to focus on LinkedIn, or we're only going to focus on channel. Because if you focus down and focus your kind of attention resources into a sort of smaller pots, you can do things well as opposed to spreading yourself too thinly and doing too many things. I think there's a couple of interesting websites. There's a website called Growth Hackers, which has a very active sort of forum, and there's a lot of information on there in terms of sort of digital, online, social marketing, and a lot of you can get lost in it because it goes into really kind of quite deep, interesting points. But you can also kind of dip in and out of it, and there's some quite good articles on there that will give an overview of things like digital marketing, social media marketing, developing an online brand, so on and so forth. I think I'm a great believer any of the kind of strategizer books are very good in terms of giving you a template to help kind of shape and guide your thinking. The Bill Orlitt book is very good in terms of giving you that map right the way through. I would just say read. Just find anything that you can and read it. It's as simple as that. And what I've always found reassuring is the more you read, the kind of the less you discover that is new, but the more what you understand is reinforced. And that then allows you, once you start to say, right, I understand this, and I'm reading the same things, you can then start to make leaps from it and say, right, well, actually for us, this is where we're going to innovate, or this is how we're going to do something differently. I think that just read and find anything that you can online.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Here's another one to throw at you. Could you maybe give us your top three traps not to fall into? Are there any things that people do in terms of branding that are just no-nos, and you see it again and again?
Yeah, I think the sort of the key no-nos for me are trying to do everything at once, and you see it time and time again with startups who feel that, particularly within the world of social media, because social media is punted as it's cheap and it's free and it will give you traction and it's this opportunity. It is, but it's incredibly time hungry, and to do social media well, you will spend your entire life trying to create content to fill channels, and trying to create content to fill channels takes you away from actually running and focusing on developing your business. So I think that takes me back to the point of kind of choose one thing and do that one thing well. If you're a business to business company or brand or product, use LinkedIn. That's where everybody is. If you're going to be looking at more kind of business to consumer, look at some of the other sites. Look at kind of Instagram or the Facebooks of the world, or Snapchat, or one of these ones where you can drive engagement. I think the kind of age-old bit of you can do a lot of the brand research yourself. I think as tip number 2, you can do a lot of the brand research and the thinking, but I would leave the actual kind of visual design to people who have trained within that field. I think everybody believes that they are a designer. I think everybody can have ideas, but I think the actual execution of a professional looking brand needs to be done by somebody who has skills within that field and not within the mechanisms of PowerPoint or Microsoft Paint, because I think you create issues for yourself further down the line.
I saw there was an article that's been doing the rounds on social media, the Sunday Times, the essential and non-essential jobs, and yes, in lockdown, and number one non-essential was an artist, and yet of course they'd used an artist to visualize.
It's wonderful. I think it's a lot like copywriting as well. I think because everybody believes they can draw and everyone believes that they can write, then people feel quite confident doing these things themselves, as opposed to necessarily looking at kind of some of the more professions. Like, people don't instantly assume I can be a corporate lawyer. I need to get a professional in to do that. People don't assume I can be an accountant. I'll get a professional in to do that. And I think part of that is it's sometimes the nature of my industry and how it's presented itself historically. And I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding about the actual value that getting brand and sort of design and creativity right, the value that can potentially add to your business.
Across the whole creative sector, really. It's a challenge.
It is. It's a massive challenge. So I think I would say, do one or two things well. Don't try and do it yourself in terms of the actual visual execution of it and the visual identity. And I think the third one, brands are not authentic. And I say that it's that bit of being honest in terms of where you are with your business at that point in time. So if you are a startup, by all means say it's a new business idea, it's a startup. Don't suddenly try and position yourself as the next kind of Apple or Google, because what you create is a thing called brand disparity, where the way you project yourself is so far removed from the actual experience of your business or your product or your service that when people go, wow, they are the next Apple, and buy your product and it doesn't live up to what Apple have been able of doing, you damage your brand and your reputation. I think what you want to do with branding is always give yourself space to grow. So if you are here, you position your brand here and you give yourself time to grow into it, and then you move it on a little bit and grow. So over time, you start off, we are a startup, we're actually a developing, growing company. Now we're quite well established. And by having that authenticity of voice, you don't get caught out by over-promising and under-delivering to your customer base. So I think that would be my three things.
Brilliant. That's very wise advice, I think. And I suppose just maybe something to end with. Top tip for a startup starting to deliver or build their brand. How do you make it happen?
How do you make it happen? I think accept that it takes time. And I think that's probably the best tip that I can give is building a brand takes time. It's not a case of you stick something online and by tomorrow you've got £500 million worth of sales. It takes time and effort and consistency. And I think if you start with that mindset of saying, right, where are we going to get to this month? Where do we want to get to by the following month? Where do we want to get to in 6 months' time and in a year? You can kind of accept the sort of the longevity of building a brand and building a consistent brand. The other thing I would say is be consistent. And it's really tempting if you are living inside that brand day in, day out. And for us, I mean, our core color has been orange since 2003. And you get to a point where you go, I'm sick of the sight of orange. But actually having that discipline to retain that consistency over time is what helps you to establish it. I mean, if you look at the prime example of Coca-Cola, it's existed for however long. It's always been red. It's always had that script font. There's always been subtle little changes that are made to it. But they've had that discipline to change it, to remain consistent to it and not to change it. And that builds up recognition, and it builds up recall, and it builds up that visibility within the mind of your customer.
Ewan, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all that great knowledge and experience and your top tips. Really appreciate you joining us today. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, there we go. I'm going to stop the recording there.